Welcome to Data Center Hawk. My name is Steve Sassy, and I'm Director for Latin America here at Data Center Hawk. At Data Center Hawk, we help others make better data center real estate decisions. We are here today with Marcos Paraíso, Vice President of Business Development for Modular Data Centers. Welcome, Marcos, and thank you for being with us today on our Hawk Talk. Let's start with some information about your background and Modular as a company. If you could, give our audience a little bit of your background, would be great, so they know,
For sure. Steve, first, thank you very much for the opportunity. It's a pleasure being with you guys here and getting you guys up to speed what's happening down here in Latam and especially in Brazil, right? So as you said, my name is Marcos Paraíso. I run the business development team for Modular Data Centers. We are a modular data center provider based in Brazil, but expanding into other regions. My personal background, I've been for a long time in the IT industry, so I'm not someone that was born in the mission critical space. I was born in the IT space. I was with IBM for a long time. During that period, I did almost all different business units IBM had at the time, leading them in Brazil and Latin America. I worked a lot with data centers in several different opportunities there, running services where you would sell projects and sell infrastructure for data centers, sometimes as general contractors, sometimes selling cabling or other kinds of components. I also ran the IBM Cloud team for Latin America, for Brazil. And at that point in time, I was actually a user. So I was actually contracting data center from local colo providers to be able to deliver our services. So I've been in the space, a close space to the ones we're discussing right now, but I've been doing a lot of things back there regarding this, right? And I got to Modular exactly to structure the way Modular is going to the market, right? So we started as an engineering company that's trying to be a provider that goes into Latin America and potentially into other regions, right? And the idea for Modular, I'm going to talk a little bit about the company here. We are a pretty young company, right? We have more or less 2 years. We started with the acquisition of the industrial operations and IP from a local PMDC manufacturer in Brazil that operated for 20 years. And that was actually the starting point, right? Because our point of view is that we're trying to solve a very specific problem. That's why Modular actually exists, right? The problem is we see a big choke in the market. If you think about the capability that the market has to deliver data center capacity versus the demand we see from all the digital transformation and digital services space demanding a ton of capabilities that basically the market cannot deliver, right? I always when talking to clients, talk about how you look at ChatGPT 1 year ago, exactly 1 year ago, they went from 0 users to 1 million users in a week, which is terrific for their business, right? On the other hand, the data center that supports that operation is done in 18 months, 2 years. So that's not something that can go ahead without some kind of resolution. That's the problem we're trying to approach here. Okay, this gap between offer and demand, right? So we started from the traditional PMDC space, modules that could provide maybe 10, 20 racks. And then we actually went into with one key client that we got here, a colo provider, and their client, and we actually back engineered what would be a modular solution to be able to address a colocation problem and a workload problem for a hyperscaler using a colocation provider, right? And that was a 1 year development experience and investments to be able to deliver the first product. It was the very first product would range from 600 kilowatts, so an edge data center, fully modular, so you'd be able to deliver between 80 to 85% of what they would need to start the operation, right? All data center, cooling facilities, all the power rooms, electrical rooms, and everything else, so that they could start very, very fast an edge operation where a hyperscaler would be willing to go into, right? So that was one very important point. We're going to be talking a bit more about that, right? So our focus was not coming from the construction side or coming from the mission critical power side, but the other way around. So what exactly would the cloud provider want if they would go into an edge site using our technology, right? And to do that, we assembled a very diverse team. So we have people that came, for example, from Embraer, the Brazilian aerospace company, people that came from Ford. So one of the head of the Ford operation down here in Brazil, that do their own manufacturing plants, and a ton of different people, right? To be able to deliver that. So we're seeing a very accelerated growth in these 2 years. We already have a backlog, which is 12 megawatts of capacity sold for this edge deployments. And we currently have projects in Brazil, Mexico, Colombia, and Chile, right? And we are currently negotiating additional projects. So it's been a very intense and interesting experience last 2 years. But I believe we're able to make a point. Right? So you can deliver almost to the entirety the components for an edge data center to handle a hyperscale cloud provider on a modular way. And that's where we're focusing on.
That's great. Oh, that's very interesting. And thank you for that introduction into modular and your background. It's very interesting too that you worked at IBM. I visited several IBM facilities in LATAM. Well, now they're Kyndryl facilities, and they're very well built. Very nice facilities. So that's great. That's a great background.
Very good.
So I think this is a very interesting topic, and I think this is why we wanted to have you on our Hawk Talk, because the industry is expanding very quickly, but the timelines, as you know, are decreasing as far as people want this services faster and faster. So I think the modular concept is a very interesting one, and so it's great that you're on with us today. So let's dive into some questions, go a little bit deeper here, so our audience can understand it a little bit better. So the first question would be, how does modular approach and modular data center solutions align with the goals and needs of both end users and hyperscale data center operators?
Sure. I would say we start that with looking at the time to market equation, right? So the issue we have right now, if you think about what are the main pain points that service providers and hyperscalers have right now, right? So you have a significant amount of difficulty in getting these facilities ready to operate in time, right? So you can have for generators, you can have lead times of a year and a half, depending on what you're trying for larger power capacities, right? So how can you solve that? So the first point is looking at that equation, trying to address it, right? To try to solve this choke point. We believe that what we can bring to the table is a set of different capabilities. The first one is to reduce their risk, right? We see a very important risk right now for a colo provider to go ahead and make a 20 megawatts investment, right? If you think about how our industry is going, and for example, the demands we have for rack density and the evolution of that, and the kinds of question marks in terms of which technologies are going to be able to solve the next step. So going from 20 to 40 kilowatts per rack to 100 to 300, how exactly is that going to be solved? Well, that's an open question. There are several different ways of doing that, but there's not exactly a consensus, right? Maybe it's going to be a liquid cooling to the chip, maybe not. And the point here is that if you take a decision right now, there's a very big risk that that decision may be a bad decision in 2 years, right? So we provide a way of starting operation and potentially getting to 7 megawatts, 10 megawatts, 30 megawatts, but starting on a smaller footprint. So maybe you're going to get to 36 megawatts. We can start with 3 megawatts. And if in 2 years you have some kind of change in terms of technology, we still can help you adapt, not for this data hub, but for the next one. And that actually allows you to do two things. First, you reduce the risk of taking a decision right now, and then you optimize capital because you don't have to put everything up front. Usually when you get a large development, you probably, from a TCO perspective, you spend 40% of everything that's going to be costing you in 10, 15 years in the first year. We're able to do something smaller and not compromise the ability to get to the final state, so the very large capacity. That's one important point that we do there, right? The other point is being modular, we accelerate the time frame for delivering those capabilities in the market. We have some data points, real data points from projects we deliver here in Brazil. We're able to deliver projects 60% faster than that specific colo provider is able to develop themselves in traditional ways, right? There's a very interesting story where they have this facility, which is just side by side with another colo provider. And they started with us on a modular implementation, and the other colo provider on a traditional one. Their competitors started 6 months before they started their construction and finished it 6 months after they started their operations.
Yeah.
So that's something that we have, real data to show that, right? And the final one is we can provide technical flexibility. So for the operators, that's the key point, right? So they can take a decision and then they have the possibility of adapting throughout time, right? For the end users, the key point here in our point of view is user experience, right? So we cannot expect a hyperscale cloud provider or a CDN vendor to use our products within a colo context if the user experience is worse than having a traditional data center. So we develop technology that allows us actually to build these rooms, which is kind of a Lego approach, where we actually get multiple rooms together to build a facility that, in the end, the experience that end users have using that facility is exactly the same that we have using a traditional one. And that makes a lot of difference, right? There's this anecdote, an interesting story when last year, when our very first data center was delivered, that our client's client, right, went there and was saying, okay, that's terrific. Where are the modules? Where is the modular construction? So no, you are exactly within the module. You're standing on the floor of this data hall. So that's something very interesting. And the other point for users is expediting capacity, right? So we see this gold rush, people trying to get capacity in places, trying to get to markets faster. You see on the large cloud providers this fight to get first to markets, right? And we help solve that specific issue.
Yeah, no, it's very interesting. I mean, the points that you make about reduced risk, adaptability, acceleration into the market, those are great points. And I'm sure providers and users are seeking those 3 points as they build, right? So you did just answer my next question, which is agility to the market. I think you just mentioned the agility is 60% faster, right? Any other points you'd like to make on agility?
Yeah, actually, currently, as I said, within modular, what we do, we're able to deliver between 80, 85, 90% of what is needed to deploy a facility, right?
Yeah.
We're working now with partners to be able to deliver 100% of the facility. So our next step is we're going to have blueprints for data centers for 1, 2, 4, 8, up to 30 megawatts, where we can actually, through ourselves and through partners, deliver everything, right? And how exactly do we expedite the process that we're discussing at 60%? Right? So first, we start with flexible architectures, right? So differently from other providers in the market where they have a product and you have to adapt yourself to be able to use it, our architectures, they are the starting point for the final product the client will be using. I'm going to give you one specific example. We have this client here in Brazil, which is they operate international sea cables, right, for telecommunications. And they look at architecture, well, that's terrific, but I have an issue here. My standard is I need to have aisles with this kind of size. And we said, okay, we can adapt to that, right? Oh, and by the way, I would prefer to use this kind of provider for the cooling system. We would say, okay, we can do it, right? So we're actually able to work as an extension of the client's engineering team, providing them consulting and guidance, but also adapting our product to whatever they're going to try to use later on, to their requirements, right?
Yeah.
So that's a very, very important point in how we are able first to break the user experience point, the discussion we were talking before, right? The second one is we are trying to have a vertical integration of our operation. What does that mean? That goes from having inbound logistics, so we can import ourselves equipment from the US, from Europe, from China, whatever it is, right? Up the point where we can actually develop a full project for a client and everything in between, right? We also are developing strategic partnerships with vendors, and that allows us actually to get equipment faster because of the volumes that we do right now. So that's something very important, right? Not only have the inbound logistics I told you about, but also we have some strategic stock we keep to be able to address some of the demand. And the final point is every single interaction. That's a very key point when you compare what we're doing to traditional construction. So it's very difficult for you to interact on a traditional construction. Every single site is different, and sometimes every single crew is different. We're able on a manufacturing facility to be able to every single data center we build, we improve it a little bit more, right? Be it in terms of processes, in terms of materials, in terms of whatever, right? And we're not stopping there. So that's you get all that together. That's our formula to be able to address this agility point in the market.
Right. So the agility obviously is important, but as far as high quality digital infrastructure, how does Modular address the challenges of supporting mission critical environments, ensuring reliability and stability of operations without sacrificing speed to market?
Sure. There are some points here. The first one is already kind of talked about, right? So clients, usually if you get a large client, they have their mindset of what they need and what they want. So they have their requirements, they have their rules, they have everything that says the data center I'm going to be into has to have this kind of capabilities and specifications. So we start with this. That's a very important point. So for example, our very first product and the ones where we developed later on, they usually are a mix of our colo provider client requirements. So they're very strict, right? So they're used to operating, in this specific case, almost 130 megawatts capacity down here in Brazil. So they know their stuff. Mm-hmm. But on top of that, we put the requirements for their clients. So as I told you before, we get our base architecture and we adapt ourselves to be able to address those two requirements. If you get there, that's going to be mission critical, and that's going to be the right configuration to have a rock solid operation. That's point number one, right? Yeah. The other point is our approach to engineering. We call it engineering to suit, right? It's exactly what I was discussing here. So we have currently almost 9 engineers now in our team, and this team operates as an extension of the client's team. So the idea is to co-develop the product that's going to be purchased by the client, right? And this allows us to actually to create a very interesting and useful relationship with end clients, where in the end, what they're buying is what they built with us, right? I already talked about vertical engineering. So currently, for example, we build in our own facilities panels. We build HVAC for the smaller modules that we have. And we are trying to get additional components in, which doesn't mean that we're going to only be working with our parts. One big differentiation we have is that if a client wants to use this kind of HVAC equipment, this UPS or those electrical components, we can adapt whatever they want, which is pretty different from the larger players in the segment, right? And finally, we have the experience of running data centers. Right. So as I said before, we have people that came. Yes, we have people that came from Schneider, from GE, from several different companies. But we also have people that actually operate a data center services, like myself. I used to sell colocation, hosting at IBM, and outsource at IBM. So we come with this mixed experience set that allows us actually to understand exactly what's to be mission critical, what end user actually wants, and how can we make an operation something which is suitable and we hope delight our clients.
Yeah. Okay. No, that was great. Thank you. So now let's talk a little bit more about the future, right? The future of data centers, the industry, the markets you're in. So how do you envision Modular shaping the future of data centers, let's say the next 5 to 10 years?
Sure.
And especially in the rapid digital transformation world that we live in today.
Sure. I'm going to talk first about the dream, right? The ambition, and then where we're focusing on. So the ambition is we really would like to be one of the factors that makes modular the mainstream consensus on how you build large-scale data centers, right? We don't believe that that there's not a way right now out of this because of all the requirements and all the demand that we see in the market. So that's our ambition, right? It's a big ambition, and we're working to try to do that. As I said before, the way to approach that is from the workload perspective, the end user, right, and the user experience standpoint. That's where we start, right? The other one is through repeatable processes. So the very first hyperscale bound product we did, it took us a year. The second one took us 2 months. So we're improving, we're making that faster. So that's something that we believe that throughout time, we may be able to break that situation where the traditional approaches are the consensus to something like what you see here. This is evolving so fast that traditional methods cannot actually go alone, right? So we intend to evolve our offer through interactions, through speed. They cannot be matched. That's the idea, right? But our main focus right now is, I would say, it's two main areas, right? The first one, as I said, colo, hyperscale. So that's something that we're looking into because the market's extremely heated, right? And that's I would say is where most of the investments are, right? But we're actively and very keenly looking at the edge, right? So we're basically discussing in the region with all the tower companies established down here, all the submarine cable companies, telcos, and all of these guys, because they have some very specific problems that will demand potentially large-scale colos, not necessarily large sites, but potentially dozens or hundreds of sites, right? If you look at the 5G transition in Latam, where most of the telco providers would come from using appliances in 4G, they would buy from the Nokias, the Ericssons, the Huaweis, that could be in a technical room with no specific requirement for HVAC or whatever that is. And in 5G, all that is virtualized in servers with virtualization from VMware or Red Hat and with virtual network functions. They need data centers. And I can tell you, they do not have them, right? So we see the first layer, the network, there's going to be a massive investment in edge to be able to spread the network, improve services, right? That's the 5G network. We see the application on top of that. And then we see also a lot, and that's because of our geography, right? A lot of interest in having colo just by the landing station, the cable landing stations for all the submarine cable companies, right? So this is a space that we're looking very keenly, and we're working with them. We're working with several of them, and we believe it's not right now, but we believe the next 2 or 3 years that's going to be a very heated space for us. So those are the two main vectors, right? We plan to get this model we built for the hyperscale and for colo and grow it, and we're looking at the edge and to be able to use funds and experience from the colo side and factor them into this new edge offers we're working on.
Yeah, I mean, it's incredible. And I think myself, way back when I thought of modular, I was thinking, some sort of small data center in the middle of nowhere with 6 racks and little power. But what you're talking about here is maybe that's a model for the edge for 5G or for the cable stations, but you can go all the way up to, like you said, 30 megawatts, right? So
exactly.
Or more probably. So it's an incredible concept that it's scalable.
Yep. One important point for the 30 megawatts, something interesting, right? For the 30 megawatts, we're seeing because of all the growth in AI and ML, Latam became kind of a hotspot for projects around the space, right? Especially Brazil. There are some countries that have some challenges, like Mexico. There's a challenge with power in Mexico.
Yeah.
But for Brazil, specifically speaking, you have clean energy. You have a lot of real estate, which is cheap. You have local users too, so there's a market now here. So it's become kind of a hotspot for international players to look at the country and say, this is a place I could deploy maybe 30 megawatts for ML, AI and ML, right? Because AI and ML as a workload, latency is not an issue. You're basically trying to train a model for a week or for a month, and then you use it. So there's absolutely no issues there with being 100 milliseconds from the US.
Yeah.
So the market down here looking at this is extremely heated, right? And that's one of the areas we're working on to address this problem by providing the up to 36 megawatts architects are working on right now.
Yeah, and you mentioned AI and ML, and I think it's an important point too. And what we're seeing in the US now, and I'm sure this is going to happen in Latin America as well, is the providers now, or the hyperscalers and the AI companies, they have to adapt and they have to go where the power is. Before it was latency, you have to be closer to somebody for late. Now it's where the power is. So I think it's an important that what we're used to in this market of the primary cities, the markets all concentrated in one location, that's going to change in the near future.
Yep.
So one last question for you. You did mention at the beginning when you made the introduction about you guys are in 4 LATAM countries today, or you're definitely looking to do business in 4 Latin American countries. Can can you give a little more specifics in what you're doing outside of Brazil, and maybe are you looking to do anything in the US or in Europe or Asia Pac?
Sure, sure. Well, first, LATAM is a very interesting market to be into at this point, right? Because if you look at LATAM in 2019, there's an estimate that there was a total capacity installed for coal around 190 megawatts, right?
Yeah.
Currently, we're at 672,
Yeah.
right? And we still have a penetration which is a fifth of the US.
Yeah.
So this is a market that will grow, right? We know that, and we are looking into that for several different reasons, right? First, because there was a lot of data center capabilities served from the US. All the cloud providers started there. Brazil started getting cloud providers down here around 10 years ago. Now they're moving into Chile, Mexico, but the fact is it's still an underserved market. So we're looking at this, we're working on that. The current expansion we have is actually along with our key client, our main client right now, that has a Latin America expansion plan. So they are using our technology to help them expedite their regional growth plan, regional growth strategy, right?
Yeah.
But we do have plans for the US. So we're discussing with some players in the US the possibility of doing something in the US. That require a lot of thinking, because for sure producing Brazil and export the US may not be an option. But yes, that's in the equation right now. We're looking at that. And we believe that we will have with the current, not only digital transformation you see in our region, but along with the new push with AI and all of that we probably have some 5 or 10 years with a very, very strong growth, right? The current projection for LATAM is growing 8% per year in the next 5 to 7 years. But we believe that with the new interest around AI, that can be probably more and for a longer time. So we're looking into this. And the issue is exactly that. If you go to a cloud provider right now and you say, I'd like to buy machine learning capacity per hour, you'll probably not be able to do it. They'll ask you for a three-year contract, exactly because they don't have capabilities right now. They are constrained, right?
Yeah.
So that's the terrific opportunity for us to go after, and we're 100% focused on trying to address that.
Yeah. And I think certain markets in Latin America are set up for that, as far as power, others are not.
Yeah.
We know which ones are in better status than others, but and like you mentioned, I know you've been supporting one of the major players in Brazil today, supporting hyperscale companies, and I know that if you guys are behind that, their growth, they've had some tremendous growth since March 2020 when they were founded. So it's an incredible story. So thank you for that. Well, Marcos, it's thank you for your time today. It's very, very interesting. I think Modular has a bright future in front of you. The region, as you mentioned, there's about 672 megawatts. I think it's a little higher than that if you include all of LATAM. I think you're probably in the 750. But based on my analysis, there's 1.5 gigawatts of capacity that's already been announced in some of the major markets. Some of the power issues are constraining some of that growth for now, but once the power becomes available, I think we're going to see tons of new construction and building in the region. So I think you guys have a bright future, and I look forward to hearing of your success in the future.
For sure. Thank you very much. And thank you very much for hosting us.
Thank you. Have a great afternoon.
Thanks, Steve.